for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After decades of corporate consolidation, small and independent farmers are limited to fewer, larger meat processing facilities to prepare their product for consumption. Over 20 years ago, the market share of the two largest meatpacking firms was 21%. Today, there are just 4 companies, these are the 4 companies that occupy over 50% of the market, even though there are almost 6,000 meat processing businesses in the United States. And these conditions, as we're hearing, have led to a scarcity of options for many independent farmers, many of whom must now travel great distances to process their meat. I really appreciated, Mr. Gunthorpe, your description of the boot of monopoly power. I think that is an apt description for how small independent farmers are being crushed. And before we get to that, I just wanted to pick up on something that Mr. Salatin was just saying. Do you think that the essential components of food safety is subjective? Yeah.
Yes, I think it is. As I mentioned earlier, 80% of the inspectors, by my estimation, do a great job, are there to ensure we have safe and wholesome food supply. 10% of them probably don't do their job, and 10%.
But that 80% are judging on standards that it sounds like you think are appropriate. They are core essential functions of food safety?
Yeah, employee hygiene, pre-operational, operational sanitation, ensuring that you're meeting critical control points. I mean, those things are essential whether we'd have USDA there or not.
Thank you. So they're essential. I just wanted to make it clear that it's not like we're looking at food safety and saying this is a whole set of things that we can just judge whether or not they're safe. There are certain clear standards, and that is what the regulators are trying to regulate. And I understand your point. You've been nuanced in saying that they're not necessarily all doing a great job. I understand the things we need to do better, but that you're in favor of having some regulations and that the majority, 80% of them, do a good job.
Oh yeah, those 4 large corporations, and even down to a much smaller scale, it'd be a free-for-all if we didn't have inspection. But I still think person to person is a different.
Of course,
yep.
Understood. The U.S. Department of Agriculture reported in 2002 that pork farm concentration in hog slaughter increased from 30% in 1989 to 57% in 1999. In 2004, Mr. Gunthorpe, you began operating your own USDA-inspected processing plant due to limited processing availability. Can you talk about why you think there was limited processing availability at that time?
I mean, that's a story that would probably take a whole book, but, the hog industry consolidated. The big guys kept getting bigger and, pushed out the little guys. And as I mentioned earlier, in 1998, we sold live pigs for less than what my grandpa sold them for in the Depression. We really had no choice but to quit the hog market. It was over. It went from 600,000 hog farmers to 60,000 today. Everybody quit.
Yeah.
We just chose to try a different path so that I could still raise pigs.
Yeah, and you've been really successful at that. You've maintained your processing facility for almost 20 years. As companies have consolidated more during that time, has access to processing facilities improved?
In some ways it's improved, but in lots of ways that it's got worse. And I tell people, processing plants disappeared, but we forget the kind of processing plants that farmers need to be able to direct market had completely gone away. The little processors that had a truck that did a route, that actually made a whole bunch of different products, served restaurants and retailers, those didn't exist when we started direct marketing. We've had to rebuild this whole processing
You've had
sector.
to really rethink the whole thing.
Yep.
Currently, just 4 companies, as I mentioned, control more than half of the market in chicken processing, close to 70% in pork, and nearly 3/4 in beef. How does that consolidated power, I mean, we've spoken to this in different ways, but briefly, how does that consolidated power impact the pricing for independent farmers and consumers?
It drastically impacts, the pricing for farmers and consumers. We've been told economy of scale, and I have a degree in economics from Purdue University, but it realistically has not worked for farmers or producers. It has not increased farmers' prices. It's drastically reduced farmers' prices, and it's increased consumers' prices. All of that improvement has went to the people of the middle. And in my opinion, the Department of Justice, the USDA, and the Federal Trade Commission have been on vacation since the 1970s on antitrust issues.
And they're absolutely agree, and they're coming back in a big way, and I really support
I'm ready
that.
for them to go back to work.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Jayapal. I now recognize the chairman of the IP